Imagine discovering that a 10-year-old child is pregnant, living in a nightmare no one knew existed. Now, imagine being the doctor who has to face a web of secrets, risk, and violence to save 2 lives. Would you have the courage? Subscribe, like, and leave a comment about what you thought of this emotional story. I was sitting in my office as usual, absorbing another day of work. Papers were piling up on my desk, a mix of patient records, reports, and last-minute diagnoses. The soft light from the window fell across my desk, a small relief amidst the tense routine. I was immersed in reading a report about a patient with autoimmune disorders when suddenly my phone buzzed. It was Marla, the social worker who often handled more delicate cases. I knew her tone of voice and the way she expressed herself. I knew that when she called, there was something urgent. Dr. Ethan, we have a delicate case coming in. We need your help. There was hesitation in her voice, something that made me drop the file immediately and give my full attention. What happened? I asked, trying to sound calm, but the feeling that something out of the ordinary was happening already made me uneasy. A 10-year-old girl. She's pregnant. Those words hit like a bomb. I was silent for a moment, processing the information. Pregnancy. A child. I really didn't know what to think. How could a child be pregnant? It was something I would never have imagined in my entire career. Are you serious? My voice came out lower than I intended, almost a whisper, as if trying to understand what reality was presenting to me. Yes, I am. She arrived with signs of complications, and it's a delicate case. She needs to be seen right away. We already have her in the emergency room. I'm on my way. What else could I say? Marla knew I wouldn't hesitate. I never hesitated when a human being needed urgent care, but this case, it was different. My mind tried to make sense of the information, but my stomach was already in knots, as if it knew there was something more behind this story. Something I couldn't yet understand. I arrived at the hospital in just a few minutes, as if my car knew the way without me needing to think. As I entered, I went straight to the emergency department, where Marla was waiting for me with a grave, distant expression. She looked tired, like someone who already knew she was about to face something much bigger than her strength could handle. She's in a private room. We've done the preliminary exams. Marla hesitated. She doesn't speak much. Something told me that fear had silenced this girl's voice. When I entered the room, my heart skipped a beat. Lily was there, sitting on the bed, her eyes lowered, avoiding any kind of eye contact. She looked like a child, but at the same time she didn't. Her shoulders were hunched, as if the weight of the situation was heavier than her own age. She was wearing hospital pajamas, but her expression was that of someone who had lived more than she should have. I approached slowly, trying not to scare her more than she already was. Hi, Lily. My voice was gentle, trying not to sound intrusive. She didn't look at me right away, so I stood by her side, waiting for her to feel that she could speak, or not, in her own time. My words were simple, almost more of a question than a request. Are you okay? How are you feeling? She lifted her face, but only enough to glance at me. Her brown eyes seemed small, as if trying to hide what was going on inside her. She was a child, but that look was of someone much older, more experienced. She shook her head hesitantly, but didn't say a word. You're afraid, aren't you? I asked, like someone trying to open a door that the girl was determined to keep shut. She looked at me briefly and for the first time seemed to consider my words. Then, in an almost inaudible sigh, she spoke. He will make me stay quiet, he won't let me tell. I knew she was referring to something much deeper, something I didn't fully understand yet, but the fear was palpable. Fear of who? Who could be threatening such a young child? Why was she pregnant? I couldn't understand, but I knew I needed to let Lily speak, or she would never have the courage to open up. I sat in the chair next to the bed, keeping a respectful distance so she wouldn't feel pressured, but close enough for her to know that I was there to listen. I stayed quiet for a while, waiting, trying to give her the space she needed. I knew I couldn't force it, but I also knew that this conversation, this exchange, could change everything. Lily, no one is going to hurt you here. I'm here to help you, okay? I said, trying to convey as much trust as I could. She didn't say anything else, but I saw a slight movement in her shoulders as if she was relieved that maybe she wasn't being judged. What she didn't know was that I wouldn't simply let this go without trying to find out what was happening. Someone had done something terrible to this child, and I was determined to discover the truth whatever it was. I knew Lily wasn't ready to tell me everything yet, but I also knew that one day she would. I didn't know how, but I felt that this was the only way to truly help her. What I didn't know yet was that what lay behind this story would be much scarier than I could have imagined. I made a decision at that moment without knowing if it would be the right one. I would uncover the truth. And that would lead me down a path much more dangerous than I could foresee. The weight of Lily's words still echoed in my mind. He will make me stay quiet, he won't let me tell. Something about him, an unknown presence, was keeping that girl under his control, without her being able to act, speak, or protect herself. I didn't know who he was or what he had done, but the fear in Lily's eyes was enough to make me feel that something terrible was happening. Something that couldn't be ignored. After talking to the girl, I knew I couldn't just go back to my routine as a doctor. This wasn't just a medical case, it was something much bigger. Something dirty, dark, that would need to be unearthed at any cost. What was happening to Lily and why couldn't she tell? I went back to my office later, after the girl was placed under observation in a secure ward. I didn't know where to start. I couldn't just make accusations without evidence, but the fear she conveyed to me was real. Sitting in my chair with my hands resting on the desk, I found myself at an impasse. Where to start? How could I protect Lily from something that even she didn't seem to fully understand? It was then that Marla appeared. She entered the room with a serious expression, her gaze heavy with what seemed to be a mix of concern and exhaustion. "Dr. Ethan, have the police been informed about the case?" she asked in a low but firm voice. I looked at her, not quite sure how to respond. I knew the situation was beyond my capacity to act alone, but at the same time, something told me that the police wouldn't be the immediate solution. Lily wouldn't trust them. Something inside me said we needed to dig deeper without involving the authorities just yet. "Not yet," I replied, feeling the need to be cautious. "I need to understand what's happening first. Lily needs to trust me before anything else." Marla looked at me with the expression of someone who knew I was making a difficult decision. She, more than anyone, knew how delicate it was to handle cases like this. But she also knew that I couldn't just sit and wait for time to solve the problem. "And how are you going to do that?" she asked, doubt clear in her voice. I knew she was worried, but I also knew that if there was someone willing to listen to Lily, that person was me. I took a deep breath, trying to articulate a plan. "I'm going to talk to her again, try to understand more. Maybe I can find something that will help uncover who is behind this." Marla nodded but didn't seem convinced. I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She knew, just as I did, that Lily was terrified, and that the truth wouldn't be easy to discover. But we couldn't just leave things as they were. That girl's life was at stake and I couldn't afford to fail. I went back to Lily's room the next morning, after a night with only a few minutes of sleep. I knew I had to act quickly, but without pushing her more than she already was. When I entered the room, I found Lily lying on the bed, her eyes closed as if trying to hide from the world. She didn't look like she was sleeping. She looked like she was trying to erase everything that was happening around her. I approached the bed, sitting in the chair next to her, again keeping a respectful distance. I knew she needed time, but I also knew we couldn't keep putting off our conversation. "Lily?" I called, softly, almost like a whisper, hoping she would hear me without being startled. "I know you're scared, but if you tell me what's going on, I can help you." She didn't respond immediately. The silence filled the room, heavy and oppressive. I knew there was something she wanted to say, but something was stopping her. Maybe it was shame, maybe fear. Or maybe it was the fact that she truly believed that speaking would mean more suffering for her. But finally she moved, slowly turning to face me, her eyes still dark, as if carrying the weight of an untold story. She looked so small, so fragile, yet at the same time, there was something fierce in her expression. I don't know what to do, doctor." Her voice was almost inaudible, but I heard it clearly. He said it would be better for me, for everyone, if I did it. He promised that no one would hurt me." I frowned, trying to understand. I knew she was talking about the man who had put her in this situation, but the fact that she was still so confused about what had happened worried me. The fear she felt was real, but something about her told me that she was being manipulated in a way she barely understood. Who, Lily? Who did this to you? I asked, my voice firmer now without losing my calm, but also unable to hide the urgency in my words. She hesitated, and that made me realize we were on the verge of something much bigger than I had imagined. Something that was happening behind the scenes, out of everyone's sight. Something much deeper than I could understand at that moment. He's someone who knows my mom. I can't tell because he said if I did. Lily stopped, swallowing the words as if too afraid to finish the sentence. That revelation hit like a punch to the stomach. She was talking about someone close to her mother, someone who could be behind all of this. I felt a wave of anger and helplessness at the same time. I knew the situation wouldn't be simple, but now what was clear was that whoever this man was, he was controlling Lily in a terrible way. Whatever was happening, I had to find the truth. I couldn't allow Lily to be a helpless victim, no matter who it was. I looked at her, more determined than ever, and said, "Don't worry, Lily. I will find out who this person is. I promise." The waiting room was empty, except for the occasional patient who passed by quickly, avoiding eye contact. The cold, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital seemed to reflect the sense of helplessness I had felt since I started investigating Lily's case. There was no concrete evidence to confirm what she had told me, and what troubled me most was that I knew the silence of everyone around her was not just a coincidence. I was sitting in my office, reviewing Lily's exams, which were still with me, when I realized something disturbing. In every piece of paper, there were bits of information that could be the key to revealing the truth, but everything was in scattered pieces. She was pregnant, that much I knew, but no one knew exactly what had brought her to that point. What troubled me the most, however, was the fact that Lily still couldn't fully open up, even though I was certain she was trapped in something bigger than she could comprehend. As the weeks went by, I became more and more obsessed with uncovering the truth. Every test, every conversation with other doctors, every attempt to consult other professionals who might have some clue about the case, everything led me to a dead end. There was nothing that truly proved abuse. Nothing that directly pointed to the responsible person. I was in a dangerous game, my word against the system. I knew that if I didn't find something concrete, what Lily told me could be questioned. I could be seen as someone trying to create a story where there wasn't one. If I was too careful, I could ruin any chance of getting justice for that girl. And yet, the fear in her eyes, the terror, never left me. I knew something was rotten in this story, but finding the right pieces seemed to be an impossible task. I decided I needed help, and the only person who seemed as committed to the case as I was Marla. I had hesitated to bring her closer to the investigation until that moment, but the weight of responsibility was becoming too much to carry alone. She had experience with delicate cases, with situations that required more than just simple evidence, but also human understanding. I knew she was the right person to help me if I could convince her. I found Marla in the hospital corridor the next afternoon, after my appointment with Lily. She had tired eyes as if the days were dragging on for her too. I couldn't leave her out as she knew the system from the inside. Without wasting time, I approached her. "Marla, I need your help." My voice was firm but not without a hint of urgency. I couldn't wait any longer. I need someone who can help me look beyond the evidence I have. Lily needs proof and She looked at me with a serious expression. Marla was never the type to be swayed by external pressures, but she also knew that when a case needed to be solved, she would do whatever it took. And it seemed that now Lily's case had become personal for her as well. "I've heard what you have to say about the case, Ethan," Marla began, her voice now low but with a tone of concern. "But you know how the system works. Without proof we can't do anything." I looked at her directly, feeling the weight of every word she spoke. The truth was there, just a step away from being uncovered, but without the right documentation, all I had were empty words. I knew that wasn't enough. "I know, Marla," I replied, trying to remain calm. "But something tells me we're being watched, that if I don't act quickly, I'll lose my chance to help Lily. We need proof, something to show that she is being controlled, that she had no choice in this process." Marla looked away as if calculating the options. Then she sighed as if she had reached the same conclusion I had. "I'll help you dig deeper," she finally said, "but we'll have to be careful. This is a delicate investigation, and if anyone finds out, it could affect everyone involved." The feeling of relief was temporary as I soon realized the size of the risk I was taking. We had to be extremely discreet. Any wrong move could ruin everything. Even so, the determination to help Lily was above all. In the following days, Marla and I started examining everything within our reach. We discovered that Lily had been visited several times by a social worker who, on paper, was supposed to be a help to her. But something seemed strange. The social worker's behavior was evasive, and when we looked for information about her, most of the records seemed to be missing. Every clue we found led to more questions. The social worker had accessed Lily's medical records without clear explanations, and her reports were confusing. When we tried to find out more about this woman, we discovered that she had a direct connection to Lily's mother, a long-standing friendship. At this point, I knew this was no coincidence. But I also knew that we needed more than just a friendship to accuse her. Time was against us. Each day without concrete evidence made Lily even more vulnerable to those who controlled her. I was determined not to let her fall into the wrong hands again. I just didn't know that, as I got closer to the truth, the web of lies and manipulation surrounding her was deeper and more dangerous than I could have imagined. Marla seemed as exhausted as I was, but she knew we couldn't give up. Not when a life was at stake. "Ethan." Marla called me one afternoon, looking at the computer with a shocked expression. "I found something. But this changes everything." The office was silent, except for the low, constant hum of the fan in the corner of the room. I was distracted, shuffling through the papers that filled my desk, trying to organize Lily's most recent exams. The weight of the case was starting to consume me in a way I didn't want to admit. Every day I felt closer to uncovering something big, but at the same time I felt a growing anxiety. It was hard not to feel guilty for not realizing the gravity of the situation sooner. Lily was sitting on the examination bed, nervously swinging her feet on the floor. It was the fourth time I'd seen her since we began the investigation, and she always seemed withdrawn, but her eyes, there was something there I couldn't quite describe. Something between fear and resignation. I knew she was afraid, but I was starting to believe that she didn't want me to discover everything. The only thing she truly wanted was for someone to understand her, and I felt like time was running out. She always grew quieter during routine exams, as if she didn't know how to deal with the fact that she was being observed, that her body was now carrying a burden no 10-year-old should ever have to bear. What disturbed me most was that Lily couldn't articulate what was happening. Fear had paralyzed her ability to speak, and it seemed she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. It was then, during one of the last consultations, that something in the exams caught my attention. I was reviewing the latest genetic results of the baby. There was a section of the graph, an area that was usually insignificant, but now it was highlighted in a way I couldn't immediately identify. I stopped, staring at the screen, my heart beating faster as the reality of what I was seeing began to take shape in my mind. It wasn't just a matter of pregnancy. It wasn't just about what would happen to Lily's baby. It was something much deeper and more terrifying. Something that changed everything. The rare genetic syndrome the exam revealed was something I had seen only once in my career, a single isolated case that had occurred years ago, and no one had expected it to happen again. Lily's baby had a rare condition that caused physical deformities and potential nervous system defects. This could affect its survival and, more importantly, the quality of life it would have. I wanted to believe that this wasn't Lily's case, that it didn't apply to her, but the truth was undeniable. The worst part, however, came right after the results. I knew enough about genetics to realize that the pattern in the results was not common. It wasn't something that happened by chance, and what I was seeing wasn't just a coincidence. The baby was being affected by a genetic factor from a specific lineage. A lineage that, when I looked at Lily's family records, revealed something that made me swallow hard. The father of the baby wasn't just closer than I had imagined, he was closer than I could ever have believed. I stood up abruptly from my chair, the weight of the revelation crashing down on me. The father of the baby, the person who had gotten Lily pregnant, wasn't just a random stranger. He was directly connected to Lily's family. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a misinterpretation of the exams. But as I began to look for more information, the connections formed in my mind, leading me to a horrifying conclusion. Lily's name wasn't there by accident. Her father, the man who was supposed to protect her, was at the center of all of this. He had been diagnosed years before with a rare genetic syndrome that passed from generation to generation. And now Lily's child, the baby she was carrying, was doomed to the same condition as her own father. All of this was happening within a sick family cycle, but the most shocking part was that, in the timeline, he was also responsible for Lily's pregnancy. I felt dizzy. The information was there, raw and clear. Lily's father, someone who should have been her safe haven, was not only the person who had imposed his power over her, but also the one responsible for the genetic condition of the baby. This wasn't just abuse. It was something far more insidious, a web that involved more people than I had imagined. Anger and horror mingled as I stared at the screen. I knew this wasn't an isolated case. I knew there were more people involved in this scheme, people with enough power to manipulate the truth and hide what was really happening. That was even more terrifying. I needed to act quickly before something irreparable happened. I went back to the examination room, where Lily was still sitting on the bed, with a vacant, distant look. She seemed to sense that something was wrong but didn't know exactly what. When I looked at her, I realized that this wasn't just about a genetic mistake or a body carrying an unwanted burden. It was about a child being manipulated by those who should protect her. I knew what this meant, but fear gripped me. I was about to uncover a truth that could destroy lives. But I had no choice. I had to move forward, for Lily, for this baby who was already trapped in the cycle of destruction that the world around him had created. Lily? My voice was trembling. She lifted her head as if trying to read my face, to find answers in my eyes. I took a deep breath before continuing. I will do whatever it takes to protect you. I knew the moment had arrived. The evidence was clear, the connections were made, and all that was left was to make the toughest decision of my career. In any other situation, I would have tried to be more cautious, to analyze one more time, to look for other options. But there was no more time to hesitate. Lily was counting on me, and now I had to face an entire system that wasn't prepared to handle the gravity of this situation. When I entered my office, I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. I was no longer just dealing with the case of a pregnant child. I was trying to dismantle a network of abuse and neglect that extended far beyond what I could have imagined. And the more I investigated, the more I realized I was dealing with something much bigger than just a failure in a system. I was confronting a power structure, one that had the ability to silence and destroy anyone who dared to question it. I took Lily's test results out of the drawer and placed them on the table. Those papers now represented something far more important than simple medical diagnostics. They were irrefutable proof that the abuse Lily had suffered came from a source much closer than anyone could have imagined. I didn't know what terrified me more, the reality of the situation or the realization that by opening this door I couldn't turn back. I went to the phone and called Marla. She was already aware of the gravity of the case, but I needed her support. I needed someone I could trust as I prepared to face the legal and social system. Marla, it's time to act. I tried to stay calm, but my voice betrayed the nervousness I was feeling. I have the evidence. Everything is connected. Lily's father is directly involved in her pregnancy, and the evidence points to a cycle of abuse that needs to be stopped immediately. Marla was silent on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing as she processed what I had just said. Finally, she replied, with a tone of voice that mixed concern and determination. You know what this means, don't you? She didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew. It wasn't just about protecting Lily. Now, I was about to face powerful people, people who had enough influence to bury this story before it even saw the light of day. I know. But we can't allow this to continue. I can't look at her and pretend I don't know what's happening. We need to act, and fast. The silence that followed was heavy. Marla didn't need more convincing. She knew that after everything we had discovered, there was no turning back. There was something urgent and important that needed to be done, and I knew that she and I would need to join forces to fight against a current that doesn't forgive. I left the office with a feeling of urgency tightening in my chest. I knew I was walking a fine line, where one mistake could mean the destruction not only of Lily, but of any chance for justice in this case. The only thing motivating me now was the hope that, with the evidence in hand, the truth would prevail. I arrived at the Child Protection Department with the evidence ready to be presented. I felt the weight of the papers in my hands, as if the responsibility of the entire town was on my shoulders. When I entered, I was met with a mixture of apprehension and disbelief. No one seemed willing to believe the gravity of what I was about to reveal. The first reaction was an uncomfortable silence, as if they were waiting for an explanation that would make sense of all of this. "Dr. Ethan, you know this is absurd, don't you?" The chief, a middle-aged man with a stern face, didn't seem too eager to go along with my story. He crossed his arms and looked at me skeptically. "You're claiming that the child's father is who? This all needs to be proven, you know that." I felt like I was trying to sell a lie, as if the truth was right there in front of them, but they refused to see it. But I knew I couldn't just give up. If the police wouldn't believe me, I would have to take a step further. "I have the genetic test results, Chief. They prove that the child has a rare syndrome that could only have been passed down by Lily's father. And it's not just any father. He's a well-known man, a man who is directly tied to this story of abuse. I'm talking about something that goes beyond a simple pregnancy. This is a crime, a cycle of abuse that needs to be stopped now." He looked at me more intently, but there was still something in him that wasn't ready to swallow it easily. I knew I needed more than just words. I needed the cooperation of people willing to do whatever it took to protect Lily. And as it seemed, the only person who could help was Marla. She had connections, she understood how the system worked, and she knew how to apply the necessary pressure for the authorities to act. In the following days, I was dragged into a series of endless meetings and discussions. I felt like I was fighting against impenetrable walls, as if each step forward was more difficult than the last. The system was moving, but it was slow and reluctant. For every effort I made to present the evidence and seek a solution, there was an obstacle that appeared in my way. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't leave Lily alone, not when she still didn't know what was behind all of this. I had to fight the system. And even though the battle was immense, even though I was feeling more and more exhausted and frustrated, I knew there was no other choice. I wasn't going to abandon a child, not now, not ever. And as the battle began, there was a sense that the truth, however painful it might be, would eventually prevail, even if it meant fighting until the very end. The hospital was quiet that morning, which gave me a sense of peace. But it wasn't just any peace, it was the feeling that after everything we'd been through, there was finally a chance for recovery. I felt as if I had been thrown into a whirlwind of pain and injustice. But now, as the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, I began to see something different. Something I still couldn't believe. A new life, a new chance. When I entered Lily's room, she was sitting on the bed, her eyes fixed on the baby sleeping beside her. The soft morning light illuminated her face, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed at peace. There was something in her eyes that was hard to describe, a mix of deep pain and an almost tangible hope. The girl who had once been lost, devastated by a cruel fate, was now showing signs of healing, signs that she was transforming. I approached her slowly, cautiously. I knew that, despite all the progress, there was still much work to be done. Lily had experienced things no child should ever go through, and it would still take time for her to heal emotionally. But what surprised me was the shy smile she gave me when she saw me walk in. It was a different smile than I expected. It wasn't the smile of a child still trying to find a little light in the darkness. It was the smile of someone who was beginning to understand that she had power over her own future. "Dr. Ethan." She said my name in a soft tone, almost as if testing the words. I was scared before, but now, I know I can take care of him. She pointed to the baby who was curled up beside her, wrapped in blankets. I smiled, feeling a knot loosen in my chest. I knew this was an important moment for her. It wasn't just about the child she had brought into the world, but about what she was beginning to realize about herself. She had incredible strength, something that hadn't seemed possible before. And more importantly, she wasn't alone. "You're very strong, Lily." I crouched beside her, gently touching her hand. You've done something wonderful. Now, the most important thing is that you have the support you need to move forward. You have every right to be happy and to build a good life for yourself and your baby. She looked at me with a glimmer in her eyes, as if for the first time she was hearing those words and starting to believe them. It wasn't just about survival, it was about resilience, about reclaiming her life. And as I looked at that baby, I knew that, at least for that moment, the child was safe, and Lily had a chance to live a life without fear. Over time, with Marla's support and the work of a specialized psychologist, Lily began to take slow but steady steps toward recovery. The pain she felt wouldn't disappear overnight, but she started to see a possible future, something that had once seemed distant and unreal. Each therapy session was a battle, and each small victory brought relief. Lily began to talk more about her feelings, her experiences, and gradually the weight of silence began to lift. Marla became a constant presence in Lily's life, a motherly figure she needed to learn to rebuild trust in people. They developed a deep, mutual support relationship, and I could see that this was helping Lily understand that not everyone would hurt her, that there was still goodness and support in the world. The baby's situation was also closely monitored. The initial complications due to the rare syndrome stabilized, and over time the child began to grow healthy, receiving all the care they needed. Although the future was uncertain, the medical team attending the child was optimistic, and the family that was beginning to form now had a chance to thrive, to grow with love and understanding. I looked at Lily now with a more serene expression, and felt that, despite the scars, she was taking her first steps toward a new beginning. This made me realize how much that journey, as difficult as it had been, had transformed me as well. I entered this story trying to save a child, but I was the one who learned the most. Life isn't defined only by what we go through, but by the choices we make after everything that happens to us. And in that moment, I saw in Lily the bravest choice of all, the choice to start over. Lily, I'm so proud of you. I spoke sincerely. You've shown all of us what it means to be strong, what it means to fight. And that's something no one can take away from you. She smiled again, but now with more confidence, as if she was allowing herself to believe in a future where she and her baby could be happy. As I left the room, a sense of gratitude washed over me. Not for having solved the case, but for having been part of something much bigger. Lily not only found the strength to fight against a flawed and cruel system, but also to rebuild her life. And looking at her, I saw the transformation of a child who was now ready to embrace the future. And so, looking back at what we faced, I was certain of one thing. The truth, no matter how painful, will always find its way. And the power of a new chance, a new beginning, is something that no circumstance can erase. What we saw with Lily wasn't just a tragedy, but a story of overcoming. Sometimes life puts us in impossible situations, but it's our choice how we respond. Lily chose to start over. She chose to be more than the past that defined her. And with that, she showed that the future is always an open field, waiting to be cultivated with courage, faith, and love.